Welcome to the Wild West Tennis Podcast brought to you by Quality Shot. My name is Elias Laradi. I am your host. I'm here again with the amazing Bradley Falkner. Brad, how's it going today?
Hola, amigo. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, actually.
Something seems different. Are you in Canada? You just seem different.
I'm actually in Europe on some other business. I'm actually
You are an
currently
international man of mystery, aren't you? I mean, I could just tell. I can tell, like, you always have that vibe of positivity, but I'm like, something's different. So you're in Europe. What country?
I'm right now in Paris at my dad's apartment, and I'm actually heading to Slovakia tomorrow to take care of some other business.
Well, man, hats off to you. Good, man. That is so cool. Anyways, enough about you and me. Is there tennis to talk about today?
Oh, we have lots to talk about. We got another
Awesome.
crazy announcement. The big Roger Federer calling it a career after Laver Cup. So,
Mm, yeah,
it's such a big topic that we have to talk about it. There's Davis
yeah,
Cup that we had last week. Both U.S. and Canada were playing last week. Also, we're going to touch on a few Canadians who are coming back, like Jeannie Bouchard. We have Rebecca Marino. So we got a couple Americans, that performed well in Davis Cup, and
yeah.
this week there's actually going to be a tournament in San Diego. So we're going to touch on that a little bit.
Oh, wow.
So
And this is
yeah,
right after a major. I mean, can you believe it? Tennis is nuts.
it is. It really is. And then
It's
I feel like
crazy.
every year the season's getting longer and longer. And actually, a couple of years ago, I remember Federer actually made a statement saying, "Listen, every year they're extending the season, where our off season used to be like 2-3 months. Now it's like a couple weeks. Like it's so tight and
It's,
it's so difficult and so for sure."
but it's so awesome for the fans, and that's obviously without them. Okay, yeah, like we found out in 2020 with the U.S. Open final, that was weird. No fans between I think it was Team and Zverev that U.S. Open final. With they didn't let fans in that year, but obviously, look, they complain about the schedule being long. I, as a fan, I love it. I love it, but
For
I
sure,
hear what
for
you're
sure.
saying. You know,
So let's start off with what happened last week. Actually, I'm going to touch on Davis Cup. These were
yeah.
the group stage, and then basically there were four groups, and then two from each group was going to go on qualify for the knockout phase, which will be in the end of November in Malaga. So you had a group stage in Valencia, you had a group stage in Germany and Hamburg, and then you had a group stage being
Wow.
played in Glasgow, Scotland. So that's actually where
Wow.
the Americans played. The Americans were in Scotland with Kazakhstan, the Netherlands, and Great Britain, and they actually ended up finishing second behind the Netherlands, and they're actually going to be qualifying for Malaga. So, it's another
Oh,
good result
cool.
for the American team, another good result for Marty Fish and
Yeah.
this Davis Cup team. You may want to give your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think it's great. I mean, I think Marty Fish was a great choice. I believe he replaced, gosh, Patrick McEnroe, who did a fine job. And Marty, he knows these guys. He's worked with a lot of these guys. He doesn't live that far from Taylor Fritz. I'm sure they work out a lot. I know he used to hit with Sam Querrey. Marty is a player's player. He's good. It's such a good call, and you would have thought, oh, Roddick, but I think Andy wanted to just focus more on his personal life and be at home. So Marty's done a stellar job. I mean, to get into the qualify for the end of the year, and you think you said it was in Malaga in Spain.
Malaga, yeah, and the
Yeah,
21st to the 27th of November, I think, if I remember correctly.
yeah. So kudos to Marty, and I think Taylor Fritz. He obviously lost that first round match to Holt, Brandon Holt. So he was fresh. He went over and did well, as did Jack Sock. So I was really happy to see that they advanced to the final phase. And again, I'm not as up to date on it as I used to be. I used to travel with the Davis Cup American team when they won in '07. I went to every home tie. And years prior to that, I think from '04 to '07, I didn't miss a home tie. But now it's a different format. But I'm just going to say kudos to that U.S. team. And I'm glad they're in the final phase at the end of the year.
And now I'm going to touch a little bit on the Canadians. They actually had a really tough group. They were with Spain, Serbia, and South Korea. And when people saw that group, they initially thought, okay, Nadal's going to play for Spain. Djokovic is going to play for Serbia. It's going to be a super tough ask. for them to be in the past, and the fact that Shapo wasn't playing. Felix wasn't originally scheduled to play, but then due to his poor result at the U.S. Open, wanted to get more matches on hard court. So at the last minute, he ended up deciding to play. And actually, they ended up finishing second in the group behind Spain. And speaking of Spain, actually, Carlos Alcaraz, who won the U.S. Open, was literally playing Davis Cup a week later, which is pretty crazy to think about it. And
well, it helps to be 19, doesn't it?
It does. And he ended up losing his first match as the world number 1 to Felix in a really tight 3-setter, which was a pivotal match for the tie. And that actually helped Canada reach the knockout phase of the Davis Cup. So, I mean, it's a great result for Canada. It was basically Felix, Vasek Pospisil. You had Alexis Galarneau, who was playing a challenger circuit. You had Gabriel Diallo, who was actually fresh again on a challenger circuit, who actually was just coming off a final in Winnipeg. And this was you had 2 veterans, you had 2 rookies, so I think it was a pretty good match. I felt maybe if Felix wasn't there, it would have been more difficult. The fact that they would have Felix there to carry them, when he needed to, and because of that, now they're playing the next stage. I'll be curious to see if Shapo does commit to the next stage because, as they say, Davis Cup has sort of changed formats and sort of lost its way a little bit along the way. So it'll be interesting to see if Canada really seriously commits to having like an all-star roster come end of November. Again, it's going to be the end of the season. Players might be tired. Fatigue is always a big factor. But again, it's a good result to beat Spain. They beat Korea. They ended up losing to Serbia. Who are still a really good team, even without Djokovic. There was Jaromir Kecmanovic.
Yeah, I was surprised he didn't play it. I guess he had faith in his compatriots because I thought, given that he didn't play it in the Open, that he would show up. But he'll be there at the end of the year. And whatever was going on, why he couldn't play, I don't know. It didn't matter. They advanced, like you said. So
actually, they didn't qualify. So actually, Serbia
they didn't.
They finished third, so they will not.
Wow. Well, Novak. I'm not gonna dog Novak. He's had a tough enough year as it is, and I have great admiration for the man. Sorry, I didn't. I thought they had advanced. So, but that's no knock on Nole. He wasn't there. Had he been there, I'm sure they would have. But I'm sure he had good reasons for not being able to play.
And continuing with the Canadians, actually, last week we had finally the return after more than a year of injury and surgery and recovery. We actually saw the return of Jeannie Bouchard, who played an event last week in Chennai. She actually ended up going all the way to the quarterfinals. She lost a tough 3-setter, and then now this week she's playing in South Korea. And unfortunately, she ended up playing one of I think it was the number 7 seed, Tatiana Maria, who was fresh off a Wimbledon semifinal. She actually lost 2 tiebreaker sets. I actually ended up watching the match in full this morning, and honestly, I saw shades of Jeannie Bouchard from the year where she was like top 5 when she made the final of Roland Garros, when she made the final of Wimbledon. I literally saw shades of that, and she's working with a new coach. His name is Thomas Blinkovich. I actually haven't researched him much, to be honest, but it looked like she was on her game. Like she had set points in the second set. Like she was very, very close sending it to a third, but again, you're playing a Wimbledon semifinalist, who's been playing solid tennis all year long. Yep. But again, like it's going to take week. She started last week. She was ranked outside the top 900. Now she's at like 495 just with that quarterfinal result. And also another Canadian with our following actually is Rebecca Marino. She also played in India last week. She lost in the 3rd round. And then actually she won her first match today. She beat a Hungarian, Jana Fed, in straight sets, 6-1, 6-3. So it'll be interesting what kind of results she's able to pull off at WTA 250. She's been playing some great tennis, coming off, a second round at the U.S. Open. So, it's some good results for the Canadian women's side.
Yeah, that's really great to hear about Bouchard because, as you mentioned, I think you said she was in the 900s. Now she's by that quarterfinal result, into the 400 range. Those are nice jumps, and she'll get wild cards because of her resume and her popularity. She's done commentary, I know, on Tennis Channel and I've been told she's good at that as well. So she's a great draw. Great to see her back. She'll pick up those wild cards until her ranking gets better. She'll be able to play every week she wants to with wild cards, and that's great. I may, and I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but I am a little bit going to say that I'm really considering going to. There's a WTA 1000 that'll be in Guadalajara, and that's in October, towards the end of the month. And I really would love to go there. I'm not sure if that's going to be able to happen yet. If I do, I hope she's there, and I hope you're there. I mean, we'd love to have you down in Mexico. You're like well, it's not the same group that credentialed you for the tournament in Cabo, but they love you in Mexico. It's weird. Your popularity, you're sort of like Jerry Lewis was in France. So you're the man down here. So you should come down. And Guadalajara is an amazing city. I haven't been there, but everyone that I ask loves it. So my point about talking about Guadalajara is I hope that both those Canadian players are there at that event because it's a 1,000 and a great place to pick up a lot of points. So I'm glad to hear they're doing well.
I appreciate that sentiment. Again, this is a WTA 1000, so I'm not sure if if the both of them will have to qualify based on their ranking. So that's a possibility.
I think I think Bouchard will probably need a wild card for that. And yeah, you never know how those get dished out. We don't have to give it to anybody. That's the beauty of a wild card. That's by definition. It doesn't have to be rational. It's up to the discretion of the tournament. But I think they could both end up playing it and very easily not, because on ranking alone, I'm not sure if they would. So we'll see. Hopefully they continue to improve, like you said.
And again, we're going to go back to the big announcement that Roger Federer has decided to retire after the Laver Cup this weekend. I just want to get your initial thoughts. And we had talked about this briefly before going on air.
Sure. Yeah, well, like everybody, I was surprised. I think most people were surprised that it happened the way it did. I think a lot of us, well, myself, I'll speak for myself, thought maybe he would do it sort of like Serena announced it, and maybe Wimbledon would be his last tournament, or the Swiss indoor event. So he did it kind of in a unique way. But so that's why I think it was a bit interesting and a surprise. As far as talking about the man, I'll let you go first, maybe if you want to share a Federer story you have, whether it's personally or just a match, because I have plenty I could talk about with him.
So actually, unfortunately, my media career, when I was covering tournaments for the last couple of years, Federer was injured, so I never really had a chance to cover him like in person or like even remotely, unfortunately. But I do remember growing up as a kid, I was an Andy Roddick fan. So of course, people always remember the Andy Roddick Roger Federer rivalry. It was pretty much one-sided. I think it was like 23-2 or something like that. And
2 or 3, yeah, yep.
And I know we had this discussion before, but a lot of people keep saying that if Roger Federer wasn't Roger Federer, Andy Roddick would have finished with at least maybe 5, 6, 7 Grand Slams because
for sure, sure. And Raonic would have got one, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I don't know. I think Roger picked him off at Wimbledon one year, late in the tournament. Everyone has Federer-itis in that sense that played with him in that era. He denied a lot of people a lot of goodies, which kind of, I guess that leads me to a story about Roger. One of them I'll tell you. I was interviewing Tim Henman. I think it was at Indian Wells. Roger had just beat him, but I had to do a piece on Henman, and he's a really cool dude. And he and Federer were tight. And this is typical Roger Federer. This is somewhere around 2006, 7 maybe. And I'm talking to Tim, and Federer was, for some reason, was there. He was in the room. I think maybe he had just finished an interview, but they were in the same room. And and Roger's just hanging around listening to the beginning of the interview. And this is for a magazine, so it wasn't on camera. And I said to Roger, I said, you weren't very nice to Tim. He had just beaten Tim. Because I didn't want Roger to leave, but I kind of had to keep going with Tim. So that wasn't very nice what you did to him the other day. And he's like, Roger said, typical Federer fashion. Well, he wasn't very nice to me the first few years of my career. This is true because, as you know, Henman had a good head-to-head against Roger in the early days. That was his classic Federer. I mean, like, honestly, dude, most people won't stick around, but he's just like BSing. He's shooting the breeze. That's just the way the dude is. Like, he's so chill. He's so cool. And they were just giving each other grief. And I just like that, like, I'm starting this interview with Henman, and, like, there's Federer being like a heckler, you know? And I'm trying to give him grief about, something he did that was good. I'm like, it wasn't very nice what you did to Tim. But he comes back immediately like, well, he wasn't very nice to me in the beginning of the career. So that shows you about the charm of the man. Now, here's the side I'm going to tell you that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this. I'm going to talk about Mirka and Roger. Mirka was a player, and I imagine they were acquainted from the juniors on. I don't know when their relationship evolved from friendship to boyfriend, girlfriend, and obviously to a husband and wife. But it was at the '03 Open. And that's when Roger still had the long hair. And Mirka was still on tour because she was in her tennis outfit. And I mean, this is kind of uncool, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm not kidding. In the room where, like, there's this room at the Open. I think it's probably the same. I haven't been to the Open since 2014. There's this room where they string rackets. Well, Roger and Mirka are, like, behind a pillar, and they're making out. I mean, not like they're not groping each other. It's not like the back of a movie theater style, but it's not just a peck on the cheek. Like, they're like two kids in love. And I was like, cool. Then I'm like, that's not cool. Don't be weird. Leave them alone. I just noticed it. They were being discreet. So I thought, that's cool. He's in love. That's great. I think at the time, Leighton Hewitt was dating Kim Clijsters, so a lot of that stuff happens. But it was really cute. They weren't being inappropriate. I mean, and I wasn't either. I just had a look, and I was like, nice. All right. And then the next story about Mirka, they're married, and Roger wasn't there. But it was at Indian Wells, and I was working at Tennis Channel at that time. And I think that would have been around 2000. I'm thinking around 2008, after the loss to Rafa at Wimbledon, around that time. And so they wanted me to ask Mirka if she'd do an interview. And in those days, I just walk up to people to play in the player lounge. But Mirka was in the player dining. I walked up to her and I said, "Excuse me." I think I might have said Mrs. Federer because I didn't know her. I mean, we had seen each other obviously at different places. And I'm like, "Hey, would it be all right if at some point in the next few days, could we interview you, on Tennis Channel?" And she was really cool. She had her tray of food, salad or whatever. She's like, I can't. I don't do interviews. I don't do any interviews. And a guy from Canada, a journalist, Tom Tebbett, he saw the whole thing go down. And I said, "Oh, that makes sense. That's fair. I don't blame you because you'd have to be saying yes to a lot of people, and that's hard." And she's like, "No, you're right. I just can't. And it's not that I don't want to. I just don't." And I said, "Oh, I get it." I said, I understand, but you have a good day." And Tom Tebbett, who has this really cool voice, he's got like a voice for radio. And Tebbett saw the whole thing. And I don't know if Tebbett still covers tennis for Canada. I hope he does. He's a great writer, good guy. And he's like, "Wow, that's the nicest rejection I've ever seen a man get from a woman." And I'm like, "Yeah, pretty cool, right?" So that's the two Federer stories that I'm going to share. I mean, come on, everyone knows how great the man was, how graceful the man was. He's just cool as hell. And he's one of those guys that had you been able to start your career earlier, he would have liked you. He would have known your name. I remember, I think it was 2014 at Indian Wells. He said, "Hey, Brad." And I was like, "Huh?" I was like, "That's weird. How does he know my name?" He just knew. That wasn't because I was around for a lot of his career. I was there in '03 when he won Wimbledon. I was at a lot of his matches at the Open, the French Open, at Doha, Miami. I saw Roddick beat him in Miami. I think it was 2013 or 2012. But I just was at a ton of his matches in Canada, Rogers Cup. I was there. So I just saw this guy play a lot, like many journalists. And he was the kind of dude that he would know our names. He's just a cool dude. What you see is what you get. That's all I have to say about that. Roger.
So actually, funny story. I actually remember watching on YouTube Federer played a doubles match with his wife Mirka. I think it was like a Hopman Cup thing. Can you remember Hopman Cup? It was like an exhibition.
In Perth. Yeah, in Perth before the Australian Open. Sure did.
Yeah, I think it was back in the early 2000s. I don't remember what year.
I think it's just been gone for maybe 5 years or so.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So-
players loved it.
So Federer played with Mirka, and I remember that match. And I think they were playing Leighton and another Aussie girl, if I remember correctly. My memory
Could
may
have
be a bit
been
fuzzy.
could have been Alicia Malik, most
Yeah.
likely. I'm not sure. She was blonde. It doesn't matter. They had a lot of
And
good
then
players.
the other memory I have is 2009, the Wimbledon final. That was a crazy match. And while the whole world was celebrating that for Roger Federer, I was kind of bummed out because I was this diehard and erotic fan that like based my game off his game. Like I would try to serve like him. I would try to hit like massive forehands like him. So like I really
Like Rob.
I really felt the connection to him. And he was so close. He was up a set, 6-2 in the second set tiebreaker. I'll never forget an infamous volley that he missed. And from there, just he would end up losing the second set, lose the third set, come back in the fourth, force the fifth, not get broken the entire match until the last point of the match when he ended up losing 16-14 in the fifth. I'll never forget that match. I was actually here in Paris because my dad's in the restaurant industry. And I was literally like behind the bar. Like the restaurant wasn't open because it was on Sunday. And what happened was that I was behind the bar. I was on my laptop just watching this match. And at the end, I was just bummed out. Like I was just like, crap. Like, you know, again,
it's okay if you cry. Yeah, I mean, I when I was a kid watching my idols, Bjorn Borg was my first idol. I remember I cried when McEnroe beat him at Wimbledon. Borg was going for 6 in a row. I cried. A lot of people cry, and not just. I mean, Roger cried on court too when he won and when he lost. That's another cool thing about Fed. Like he was an equal opportunity crier, and he gave people tears, but he had a lot of his own too, especially that last Wimbledon, the loss to Novak, where he had the serving for the match. He had the 2 match points on his racket. So he knows heartbreak on the court, and he knows how to give it on the court. I mean, he's experienced everything you can in tennis and life. And I guess the question, I'm curious what you think. What do you think's next for Roger? I mean, do you think he becomes a commentator? Does he become a tournament director? Both? Does he run a Legends tour? I mean, what do you think's next for Roger?
I think it's too early to say, but I mean, whatever he does, like, I'm pretty sure he'll be awesome at it, whether it's commentating, whether it's coaching, whether it's becoming a tournament director, whether it's managing,
how about Roger Federer for commissioner of tennis? Can you imagine that? I mean, what a great candidate, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like he could replace the Italian.
No, I'm saying commissioner. No. I'm saying commissioner of the sport, not head of the ATP, not president of the ATP, not CEO of that. No, commissioner of the tennis, men and the women.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have that. Other sports do. I'm not sure if soccer has one, but we have that in the U.S. with football and with basketball. I think we do with baseball. I mean, I could see Roger Federer in that role rather handsomely. If anyone could pull it off, it would be Roger. And because he, being married to a former WTA player, he would, and just a big picture thinker, he would be fair and with both tours. He wouldn't be favoring the ATP. So I could see, I mean, imagine if it was ever to be a man or a person to be the commissioner of tennis, it would be Roger Federer. I don't think there'd be a lot of opposition to that. Now, I don't know if anyone I don't know if he wants to chill in retirement, because that would not, that would have a lot of stress with it. Obviously that position, there's never been a commissioner of the tennis. But I think I'll say it here now, and I'm sure other people have on different podcasts. Why not have Roger Federer be the commissioner of tennis? I just don't think there'd be much opposition.
No, I definitely agree. And to answer your question, they do have one in MLS. They do have a commissioner for MLS, Major League Soccer. And then in Europe, it's based on the league. So I'm assuming that every league has their own little commissioner.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Roger Federer as a commissioner, but I think for
Why
now
not?
he might take a step back because remember he has 4 kids, 2 sets of twins
Yes.
that are still
Yes.
very young, so I think he might try to focus on that a little bit more, and then
Right.
maybe he might pull a Tom Brady, maybe he might do that for 2 or 3 months, and then realize that he's bored out of his mind and that he needs to do something to change his life, and he might
Yeah.
come back maybe as a coach, maybe in development, maybe commentary.
Yeah. I mean, literally, the world is this man's oyster. You know, I don't like oysters personally, but I mean, come on, the dude is like. I mean, I imagine around the house he's smooth, fixing changing a light bulb, or hanging a photo. I just imagine that everything is just like there's that smoothness.
And it's actually really funny because in his retirement letter that he wrote, "Oh, he said I want to thank my wife for supporting my goofy side." So
He is goofy, dude. That's his main side. I swear to God. Like, just you can just Google stuff he does, like outtakes of him doing stuff for TV or commercials. There's
yeah,
a really funny commercial he did with a buddy of mine who's a teaching pro, and they filmed it at Indian Wells. And I should remember my buddy's name, and I'm sorry. I'd love to give him a shout out because he's a really cool dude, but you'll know it if you watch it. I think it was the ad for Wilson. And my friend, he's a teaching pro, but he also did some media work. And Roger does this commercial with the guy. And Federer's got like a fake mustache on. It's just funny AF. You know what I mean? It's just funny AF. And like you said, yeah, that's why he was giving Tim a hard time during the interview that I was doing with Tim. Like, guy's hilarious. They're all funny. I mean, why wouldn't you be funny if you're a tennis player? Is life really that hard?
I'll never forget. Roger was playing Rafa in a charity event, and they had to tease it for the ATP. And there's literally this video. It's 10 minutes long. It's them. They screwed up like 20 times, and then the last time they nailed it. And all you remember here is Federer. Yes.
Yeah, and you know what? Federer was screwing up more than Rafa because it's in English, the one you're talking about. And so Roger, he's God, knowing him, I know it's French, Swiss German, English, and I'm sure others. I'd be willing to bet anything he understands Spanish and probably speaks it. I don't know, but so Rafa's the one. It's not his first language. It's become a lot better his English. And Rafa, they started getting a little exasperated with Roger because, like you said, he's clowning around, goofing around. They couldn't keep a straight face. They're so funny together, those two. Like, what a beautiful, they're kind of an odd couple in a lot of ways, obviously. But that's why it works. Like when they do their Labor Cup stuff, when they were giving Tsitsipas grief about doing hand signals and doubles, they're just I think Federer is a bit of a practical joker, but I don't think he would. He's nice with his humor, and because he's so charming, he only makes fun of somebody for what they do well. That's why he gave Tim grief when I was interviewing him, but he wasn't very nice to me the first 10 times we played. It wasn't 10, but it was seriously. Federer had a losing record to Hedman for a long time. There were certain guys like Curtin played Federer well. I remember it was an 03 at Indian Wells that Guga beat Roger. I think it was 2 tiebreak sets. And God, Federer was ticked off. I've never seen him so pissed at the press conference afterwards. Guga was not at the height of his power in 2003, but he beat Roger at Indian Wells. Now, Guga did get to the final that year and lost to Leighton Hewitt. And it got demolished because he had to play a semifinal match the day of the final. It's weird because they had rain at Indian Wells. So that year that Guga beat Roger at Indian Wells in 2003, Federer was pissed because it was like a first round or second round match. And Roger knew he had opportunities and chances, and he kind of blew it. He hadn't won the major yet. Remember, this is 2003 before Wimbledon. And then when Guga beat him. And I think Guga beat Roger at the French in 04 or 05 as well. So there are certain dudes that gave him trouble. Leighton Hewitt in the start of their rivalry gave Roger fits.
Did you know that Roger Federer used to be one of the most angriest players on tour. Like he used to have a really bad
Yeah.
side where, like before he calmed down, like I'll never forget. Like he always used to like get mad at the umpire. He used to like break his rackets. He used to like do like the Kyrgios thing. And then actually they interviewed him about it. They're like, okay, well, there was a time where you were really like angry and pissed off, and always he goes, what was the changing moment of your career? He goes, I'll never forget. I was playing Murat Safin in the early 2000s, and I'll never forget watching that match because it was literally a battle between two angry players who were literally breaking every racket in their bag. Like I remember
that must have been early. That must have been early 2000s.
He's like, I remember watching it on TV, and then he goes, I would break a racket, he would break a racket, I would break a racket, and then he goes, I had to realize that if I wanted to get where I wanted to be, I had to stop doing that, and that was really the defining moment of his career when he said, you know what, I'm going to change. And then from then on, like it was so rare you saw him angry. It was so rare. You just call this cool, calm, collected guy. But there were moments where, like, you know, you saw him lose his cool, like when he played Del Potro at the U.S. Open, like, and Del Potro called like for a challenge, but it was like a minute late.
Was that in the final? The year that Delpo beat him in the final?
Yeah, and there was the game. I remember there was a match in Miami, and he just missed the easiest forehand ever, and he just, and even the commentator was like, "Whoa!" Like you never see that from Roger, like never, like he had gone
sure don't.
5 years without breaking a racket, and like people were just like, okay, like you know, he's human, you know, he's not like
is he really? I don't know. I think he's an alien. I don't think he's human.
And I got a question for you.
Sure.
Do you think that the Federer-Nadal rivalry is one of the biggest rivalries in sports history?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because kudos to Roger for doing two key things that I wish Sampras would have done. One of them is Roger got a bigger head size. He increased the head size of his racket, and Pete never did that. So that's why he was able to beat Rafa in the Australian Open final. And I think it was 17. And Rafa was in a winning position in that match, and rare for Rafa. I don't know if he took his foot off the gas pedal or what, but Fed came back and beat him. So I think changing to the bigger head size helped his rivalry with Rafa because, like so many players, Rafa would just pick on your one-handed backhand. And as a lefty, you know that it's such an easy play, whether it's serving to it or cranking the forehand to it. So Roger, you know, had a bad head-to-head with Rafa. It took some seriously painful losses. The 2008 Wimbledon final, which is the best match of all time, in my opinion, still. And then the 2009 Australian Open loss to Rafa, where Federer cried after that match.
Yep.
So for him to right the ship and just like what he did to him in the Australian Open final, coming back in the fifth set, was remarkable. And then he put a beat down on. I mean, I've never seen Rafa be more like. He made Rafa look like a junior at Indian Wells that year. They meet at Indian Wells, which is a hard court that should favor Rafa because it's a very slow hard court. There's a lot of sand in the mix of the paint at Indian Wells. I mean, it roughs up the balls. So it should be the best hard court for a guy like Rafa. And Fed made him look pedestrian. So, yeah, I think it's the greatest rivalry. And I'm really happy that Roger was able to get that Australian Open. I mean, I was pretty fair-minded. I root for all greats. Probably more of a Rafa guy as far as I liked him. Like it's like having two pets that you love. But good for Roger to get those wins to narrow the gap. The head-to-head is still obviously in Rafa's favor. But yeah, I think it's the best rivalry in sports, or one of. Absolutely. And kudos to Roger for not going away and making the adjustment, improving the backhand, going with the bigger racket head size, and just solving that problem. Djokovic was probably a little more challenging for Roger at the end of his career. But yeah, absolutely. The Roger-Rafa rivalry, best in sports. I'd say, yeah, sure. Why not?
Listen, Brad, what's better? I really appreciate your time today. This was episode 4 of the Wild West Tennis Podcast, brought to you by Quality Shot. Please like, subscribe us on YouTube. Please keep following us. Next week we'll be back next Wednesday. And Brad, I'm looking at you to cover San Diego. So we'll have to get
Oh yeah,
some
I'll give you yeah. The reason I didn't talk about San Diego today was twofold. One, that it's ongoing. The main result was, unfortunately, Brandon Holt lost his first match in 3 sets. He won the first, and when I was watching online, he was going into a second set breaker, which unfortunately he lost to a French player. So Brandon Holt lost in 3 sets in San Diego, which is a bummer. But still a good result because, let's be fair, he got a wild card there. I'm sure he competed well. I didn't get to see it. I was watching it live scoring. So that's all I can say about San Diego for now. I did used to live there, so I'm very happy to talk about the San Diego tournament next week.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brad.
It's a pleasure as always, buddy. Be safe over there.
All right. Adios.
Adios, muchacho.